In this session, we want to look at implementing a UML model with an object in PowerShell. So here's a model very similar to what I've had before, where I am now adding an object because down here in my first initial activity, I am adding thing 1 is assigned a new stuff, and thing 2 is assigned a new stuff. And we know in UML that that's a classic way of saying, okay, thing 1 is a new object of the stuff class. Okay. And thing 2 is a separate object, meaning it's in another memory location of the stuff class. So both thing 1 and thing 2 are objects. They have the same property names. They have the same methods. They can do the same things. However, each one can have its own values for the properties. So thing 1 can have property A being true, while thing 2 has property A being false. Okay. Let's look at the code for that then. So we see over here that here's my class definition. Should be just like before. I have those 3 variables hanging around. I just keep them there to demonstrate that we can create variables that are not objects of some class, or at least they're objects of the built-in classes for Boolean, number, and string. But the new addition down here are these 2 lines. Okay. And I'm showing different syntax here. So the first line is what I'll call the PowerShell way of creating a new object, and that is to use a command called new-object. Which follows the PowerShell mentality of, all commands should be a verb dash a noun. The action dash what you want to do that action on. And so it says new object, and then I follow that with the name stuff. Only stuff. Yeah. Follow the name stuff. That's going to create a new object. In other words, it says, stuff is a type. Stuff must be a type. It's a type that we defined ourselves, custom type with the keyword class that has these properties and methods to it. So what it does behind the scenes is it says, okay, if stuff is a type, I need to go out and figure out how much memory does it take for one of those. So it's going to figure out how much memory does it take for a property A, a property B, a property C, a stuff, and a double stuff, kind of tally up all that memory, and then say, okay, when you create a new object, the system has to allocate that much memory and know that by the name thing 1. So much like we've said before, we made a variable like it's a lie, that says, that was the name for some place in memory where this value was going to be stored. And I could refer to this value now by its name. So very similar thing here. Thing 1 is going to be the memory address where one of these stuff objects is stored, and we can refer to that object now by the name thing 1. But the value of thing 1 is the memory where these properties are stored. Okay. The second way that I've done it here is what I'll call the .NET way of doing things. And remember, I've made the comment before that one of the nice things about PowerShell, it makes it really useful, especially for us, is it understands .NET. So .NET is Microsoft's library for everything, if you will, kind of thing. It's the same libraries that C# uses, for example. So we're going to use some basic functionality out of there, and in our low-lib mindset, we're going to create as much of that, recreate as much of that as possible. But there are a few things like memory allocation that we need that we can't easily do ourselves. Okay. Anyhow, with this .NET approach, what we see is the colon operator. So it's 2 symbols, but it's 1 operator, and that's our scope resolution operator. So we have this idea of scopes, visible areas. Think of like a telescope or a microscope. There's the visible area for the person using it, and then there's the visible area that they see either off in the distance or on this slide under the microscope kind of thing. So the scope resolution operator is a binary operator. It's going to need to know, hey, what is the bigger scope maybe, and then what is the thing that you're looking at in that scope. Okay. So what we say is stuff, we put that in square brackets, meaning that's a type. Those square brackets are actually an operator as well. They're a unary operator. They only take one argument, what's in between them. Sidebar, spoiler alert, those square brackets are going to serve double purpose. The same operator is used in two different instances. When we get to arrays, we'll see them again. That means we're just going to have to figure out, just like the machine can figure out, oh, which one is it? Okay. And the answer is, whenever it sees a type name between the square brackets, then it becomes what we call the cast operator. And it says, oh, treat this thing as a type. Okay. Whenever it sees a number, an integer number between those square brackets, it's going to say, oh, this must be an index into an array. That comes later. Don't worry about that. But for now, we can say, okay, I have a type name, stuff. The type name that I declared and defined up here in between those square brackets. So it becomes this cast operator thing. Don't worry too much about that for the moment. Basically, it says that we can take an area of memory and we can treat it as a different type. Okay. And so what's going to happen is, in this case, we are asking PowerShell to go get some memory. And PowerShell is actually going to go do that from the operating system. Go find some memory. And then we're saying we want to treat that as a stuff. Okay. So it goes into this stuff area, region, and says, oh, there's a new operator there. Oh, yes. New, no, I take that back. New is a static method. It's not an operator. In some languages, new is an operator. In PowerShell, new is actually a method. And it's what we call a static method. We'll deal with that later. That's automatically created for us. And it's to new up an object of some type. So, I know that's a lot there, and the more we use it, the more we'll get used to it, kind of thing. But either way, both of these are going to allocate some memory for a stuff type of object and call its constructor. Our constructor does nothing, but that's okay. And then you can see over here in the strongly typed version that I've just explicitly called out the type of each one of these things. And what we see is thing 1 and thing 2 are going to be of the type stuff. Okay, great. So doesn't matter. I'm assuming you pick both versions and try them, copy and paste them. I'm going to go with the weakly typed version again for some reason, and select that, copy that, bring that over to my editor and paste it in here and save that. And then I'm going to bring up my command line interpreter and I'm going to say, hey, PowerShell, why don't you take a look at UmlToPs? And it does, and it says, great, no problem. And we're happy, we're excited that it actually created two objects of this. Now, how do I know? Well, we can take a peek and we can say, okay, let's say write host $, $thing1. And then I'll save that, and I'll come over here and run this again. And oh, look at that. I said, oh, what is the value of thing 1? It is a stuff type of object. Now, you might be wondering, well, okay, stuff property A. What if I wanted to see one of the properties? So then I'm going to say, copy this, paste this down here, and I'm going to say dot, or member of operator, and say thing 1 property, let's do A, I guess. Okay. Notice I don't need another $sign there. Okay. I save that, I come over here, and oh, I forgot. Should have paused there and let you place your bets as to what was going to happen. Was there going to be an error? And if not, what we're going to see. But this is exactly what you expected, right? In other words, we said, write the value of thing 1, it displayed the type for it. When we said thing 1 property A, it displayed a blank line. And again, we know from before, the blank line is write host saying, hey, if I'm going to write anything, I'm always going to end that line, make a new line out of it, kind of thing. You actually have to explicitly tell it not to if you don't want it to. And so that was after it printed the new line, after it did this, but the value of property A is nothing, null, because we haven't actually assigned it something. So we could say, well, what if I said $thing1 was assigned $false. So I'll save that. We run it, and it doesn't work. Isn't that awesome? That is because, why? Because I said thing1. So I just overwrote thing1 with false instead of the object that's there, which is a big problem. But notice that's not an error. That's not a syntax error or a runtime error. That's a logical error on my fault. There's no way we can tell that from the program unless we said write host thing1 again. So let me copy that and paste another one in after I've done this crazy assignment and say run this. And notice, sure enough, the first time we wrote $thing1, it had a value of stuff. Now, $thing1 has a value of false because we just assigned it. We overwrote that object, so that object is gone. We'll talk another day about how PowerShell can reclaim that memory. But for now, that's important to see that we overwrote that. The other thing I wanted to do was to say, oh, yeah, maybe what I wanted to do was instead of assigning thing1 false, I wanted to assign thing1 member property A. Oops. Snowplow going by, easily distracted. Okay. And so now I'm going to save that, come over here and run this. And we see that sure enough, the first line, these are happening in order. So the first line is my first write host. That's thing1, which was the stuff type of object. We changed the property A value to false. We wrote out thing1 again, and we see that this time it is still stuff. And then we wrote out the value of thing1 member property A, and we see that it is now false instead of nothing.